Hey, glad you stopped by. If it's your first time, subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you shared the video with friends. It helps the channel grow. Write in the comments where you're watching from. I read everything. Go. I'm sitting here by myself in the apartment, and for the first time in over 3 years, the quiet feels real, complete, and undisturbed. It's not tense or uncomfortable. It's peaceful. Just stillness. Only a few weeks ago, this place was alive with the chaos of wedding preparations. Today, it's simply mine again. And strangely, that feels exactly right. After my initial post, a lot of people reached out asking for the whole story. So here it is, from the beginning. It started on a Thursday morning. Chloe, my fiancée at the time, and I had planned our final walkthrough of the wedding venue for later that day. We were exactly 3 weeks away from the ceremony. Everything was locked in. Vendors had been paid. Deposits were all non-refundable. Her wedding dress was hanging in the closet. My custom suit was pressed and ready. The invitations had gone out, and most guests had already RSVP'd. We were fully committed. There was no backing out. I was in the middle of a video meeting when my phone lit up on the desk. It was a message from Chloe. I assumed it was about the venue, maybe a reminder or a question about timing. But it wasn't that. Not even close. The message read, "Hey, I know this is really bad timing, but I can't stop thinking about Mark. I need to see him and get real closure before the wedding. It wouldn't be fair to you if I still had doubts when we get married. I do still love you, but I need to do this for myself. I'm going to visit him this weekend. Please don't worry." I stared at the text. Read it once, then again, and a third time. The words seemed to scramble as I tried to process them. Closure, with Mark, her ex, the guy she'd been with for 5 years before me, the one she always described as complicated and overwhelming. His name had always lingered in conversations too long, like a weight in the air. And now, just weeks before our wedding, she felt compelled to go see him. I didn't explode. I didn't even get upset. Something in me just powered down. That strange kind of stillness you feel when everything suddenly becomes clear, like realizing you're standing on the edge of a cliff you hadn't noticed before. All at once, the last few months snapped into focus. The distance, the late-night texting she brushed off as chats with her bridesmaids, the vague weekend plans she never fully explained. It all came together in one cold, brutal flash. I ended the call I was on and just sat there, staring at nothing, thinking about the life we were building together, the promises we wrote, the future we talked about. And then her message. It wasn't a question. She wasn't asking if I was okay with it. She had already made her decision. She wasn't seeking permission. She was simply delivering the news. With 3 weeks left before we said, "I do," she prioritized unfinished business with another man over the future we were supposed to step into together. Right then, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the guy sitting at home wondering where his bride-to-be was and what she was doing. I wasn't going to be her second option. I wasn't going to be convenient. I refused to be anyone's safety net. I picked up my phone. My hands were perfectly steady, almost unnaturally so. I typed out a short message. "Take your time." Then, I disabled notifications, closed my phone, opened my laptop, and started the process of unraveling everything we had built together. This wasn't a postponement. This was a complete undoing. From that second forward, it was over. The first call I made wasn't to my best friend. It wasn't even to my family. I called her parents. Her father, David, answered the phone. Our relationship had always been polite. He had traditional values, but he'd treated me with respect. "Hi, David." "It's Alex," I began, keeping my tone calm. "I apologize for calling during the day, but I need to talk to you about something serious regarding the wedding." He sounded concerned right away. "Is Chloe all right?" he asked. "She's safe," I replied, "but she just told me she's planning to spend the weekend with her ex, Mark. She says she needs to do it to get closure before marrying me." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "She said what?" he finally asked. She's going to see Mark, I repeated. She told me she can't go through with the wedding unless she clears things up with him. I don't know what's going to happen after that, but under these circumstances, I can't go ahead with the marriage. I'm calling off the engagement. More silence. Then I heard his wife, Sarah, in the background asking what was going on. He spoke softly to her, just a murmur. Chloe's going to see Mark. When he returned to the line, his voice had completely shifted. I understand. Thank you for letting us know, Alex. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I answered quietly. I just thought you and Sarah should hear it right away. I paused for a beat before adding, I also have a couple of rings I'd like to return. Before I go further, let me explain the rings. When Chloe and I got engaged, she was adamant that we both wear engagement bands. She called it a modern expression of shared commitment. She even had one custom made for me, a sleek platinum band, covered by her parents as a welcome to the family gift. I was never fully on board with the idea. Where we live, men wearing engagement rings isn't exactly tradition, but it made her happy, so I agreed. Now, looking at it, that so-called equal commitment felt like a bad joke. I can bring them by tonight, I said after a moment. David's response came without emotion. That's fine. I'll be home after 6. With that behind me, I moved on to the next grim chore, notifying the vendors. I started with the venue and let them know the wedding was canceled. The woman on the line was polite, but firm. The final payment, sent 2 weeks earlier, was non-refundable. Just like that, $20,000 vanished. I called the caterer next, then the photographer, then the band. Each conversation felt like another blow, each refund denial another nail in the coffin of a $60,000 event that would never happen. My parents had contributed generously, but most of it came from my own savings, money I'd worked hard to earn. Now, it was gone for good. I sent a group email to everyone on the guest list. The subject line was simple: wedding canceled. The message inside was just as brief. Due to unforeseen personal circumstances, the wedding of Chloe and Alex, scheduled for date, has been canceled. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. No explanations, no elaboration. Let people draw their own conclusions. Whatever theories they came up with wouldn't come close to the actual mess behind the scenes. I spent the rest of that afternoon packing. Chloe had lived in my apartment for about a year, and while she hadn't brought much in the way of furniture, her belongings had quietly filled every available space, like vines climbing a wall. I walked down the block to grab some boxes, then began sorting through her things: handbags, cosmetics, dog-eared books piled by the bed. Everything went into a clearly labeled box: Chloe, clothes, Chloe, bathroom, Chloe, books. By the time I finished, 22 neatly packed boxes sat stacked in the spare room. The apartment already felt more open. It felt like it belonged to me again. At 6:30 sharp, I drove over to her parents' house with the 2 ring boxes tucked inside my jacket pocket. Sarah answered the door, her eyes swollen and red. David stood behind her, looking drained and stiff. They both invited me in, but I didn't step past the threshold. I won't take up your time, I said gently. I just came to return these. I handed over the first box, the platinum ring she'd given me, and then the second, which held the diamond ring Chloe had picked out herself. That one had cost me 3 months' worth of paychecks. David took both without saying a word. Sarah, however, eventually found her voice. We don't understand, Alex, she said, her voice shaking. Why would she do this now? That's something only she can answer, I replied calmly. All I know is, she made her choice. And it wasn't me. I'm just trying to accept that. I wished them well, turned around, and headed back to my car. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of them still standing in the doorway, 2 stunned, grieving parents holding on to the fragments of a future their daughter had just thrown away. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt empty. The cold, methodical part of me had carried out the steps with surgical precision. The rest of me was only beginning to process the emotional wreckage left behind. Back home, I ordered a pizza and opened my laptop. It was time to change every password. Update 1. It's been a full week since my last update. A lot has happened. I want to thank everyone who reached out. Getting messages of support from total strangers is a surreal experience, but honestly, it helped keep me grounded. When I left off, I had just called off the wedding, returned the rings to her parents, and packed Chloe's entire life into 22 boxes. All of that happened within 12 hours of reading her message. At that point, she had absolutely no idea what she was about to walk into. Still off the radar on what she called her closure getaway with Mark, she remained completely unreachable. The next 3 days passed in absolute silence. No texts from her, none from me. I used that time to start dismantling the life we'd built. My first step was to call the travel agency and cancel our honeymoon to Greece. Another $5,000 down the drain. Then I tackled our shared digital footprint. Every joint account, subscription, or login we had, I stripped her access from all of it. New passwords, updated usernames, total reset. I also contacted our landlord to have her name officially removed from the lease. Since she was listed only as an occupant and not a legal tenant, it was a simple administrative change. Then, on Sunday evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. It turned out to be Jessica, Chloe's best friend and maid of honor. "Alex, what's going on?" she wrote. "Chloe's parents are freaking out. They're saying you canceled the wedding? Is this some kind of prank?" I kept my response short. "Not a joke. The wedding is canceled. Chloe can explain the rest." She fired back immediately. "She's not answering anyone." "We're all really worried." "What did you do?" That last line almost made me laugh out loud. "What did you do?" As if the default assumption was that I had blown everything up. I didn't bother replying. By Monday morning, the real show began. An unknown number rang my phone. I let it go to voicemail. Minutes later, a voicemail and then a text. It was Chloe, and she sounded completely panicked. "Alex, call me!" "Right now." "My mom just called yelling. She said you returned the ring. What the hell is going on? Why would you do that without even talking to me first? This is insane. Call me." It was obvious she had just come back from her little weekend getaway, only to be blindsided by the aftermath, thanks to her mother, not me. I had simply done what she asked, given her space. Then the messages started pouring in. "Why are you doing this? I told you I still loved you. My parents are treating me like I did something unforgivable. You're twisting everything. You don't have the right to walk away without even giving me a chance to talk. Jessica told me you emailed the guest list. How could you humiliate me like that?" I read each message carefully, detached, almost like an observer. Not once did she acknowledge what she'd done. Not a single word of remorse, no apology, no accountability. It was all about her pain, her humiliation, her confusion. She had already begun rewriting the script, recasting herself as the heartbroken victim. I let her unravel for a while before sending the one and only message I intended to deliver. "You told me you needed closure before you could marry me. I honored that. The engagement is over. Your belongings are packed and in the guest room. Please let me know when you'd like them picked up. I'd prefer your father or a moving service handle it." Her response came within seconds, and it was unhinged. She unloaded a storm of insults, calling me a monster, a coward, even a psychopath. She swore I'd misunderstood everything, said I'd overreacted, insisted she had intended to return home and have a real conversation. Then came her demand to be let back into the apartment to collect her stuff. My answer was final. "The locks have been changed. Please arrange a pickup time." That was the last straw. After that, her texts became pure venom. And then her support squad stepped in. Jessica and another bridesmaid, Lauren, launched a full-on offensive. Jessica sent, "You're being emotionally abusive. She made one mistake because she was under a lot of stress, and you've completely ruined her life." Lauren chimed in next, "A real man would fight for the woman he loves. Real men don't just walk away. Chloe deserves better. One mistake." That was their version of events. a carefully planned and concealed trip to visit her ex-boyfriend, something she deliberately hid for weeks. Suddenly, everything clicked. I saw the insular world she lived in, where her choices had no weight, and her feelings overrode everything else. I blocked every one of them, Jessica, Lauren, Chloe, all gone. And just like that, my phone went quiet again. The next morning, I received a message in my inbox from her father, David. It was short and direct. He said he'd be arriving on Saturday with a moving truck to collect Chloe's things. He asked if she could come along to ensure nothing important was overlooked. I agreed, on one condition. She wasn't allowed to walk freely through the apartment. She could stand in the entryway and give instructions from there. He accepted that arrangement without protest. The days leading up to their arrival felt suspended in a surreal sort of stillness. I kept going to work, then returning to an apartment that felt like a shell of the home we had shared. Everything familiar was still there, yet nothing felt the same. The anger that had initially surged through me was beginning to recede, giving way to something colder and quieter, something like emotional exhaustion. I'd spent years building a future in my mind with her at the center. I believed in what we were creating, but it turned out that vision had been constructed on lies. It was only later, through a mutual friend who reached out with more guilt than courage, that I found out Chloe had been reconnecting with Mark for quite some time. This wasn't some impulsive moment of doubt. She had been fostering a hidden emotional relationship for months, all while smiling through engagement photos and flower arrangements. That closure getaway? It wasn't a goodbye. It was a trial run. She went to see whether reviving her past with Mark felt more genuine than the promises she had made to me. She wanted the safety of both lives. What she didn't expect was that in her absence, I'd decide I no longer wanted to offer her either space or closure. Saturday arrived and the truck pulled up right on time. David, her father, and his brother were first at the door. Chloe followed at a distance, lingering on the sidewalk. She avoided looking at me. Her face was puffy, and despite the overcast sky, she wore sunglasses. She looked diminished, somehow smaller than she had ever seemed before. I opened the door and stood just inside the threshold. "It's all packed in the spare room," I said to David. 22 boxes. Everything's ready." For the next hour, they moved in and out, steadily removing what remained of her life here. Chloe stayed rooted in the doorway, giving occasional directions in a voice barely audible. A few times, she tried to speak directly to me. "You didn't have to do it this way, Alex," she said in a near whisper. "We could have talked this through. This just feels cruel." I said nothing. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching in silence as the final fragments of her presence disappeared into the truck. Eventually, David returned, carrying the last box. He looked worn down. "That's the last of it," he said, pausing before meeting my eyes. "For what little it means now. I'm sorry." I gave him a quiet nod. Chloe stepped forward behind him, her sunglasses now gone. Her expression was a mixture of resentment and raw desperation. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked, voice unsteady. "You win. You got what you wanted. You ruined everything." I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the woman I had once imagined marrying. I saw someone I no longer recognized. "I didn't ruin anything, Chloe," I said evenly. "I just cleaned up the wreckage you left behind." Then I closed the door. Update 2. It's been 4 weeks since what my friends have started calling the Great Cancellation. The emotional debris is finally beginning to settle, but what followed has revealed more than I ever expected. The silence that once made the apartment feel haunted now feels like calm. I've been reclaiming the space, re-establishing old habits. It's jarring how much of yourself can slowly vanish inside a relationship. How easy it is to dissolve into someone else's rhythm without noticing. After Chloe's 22 boxes were carted away, I figured that would be the end of it. But I was mistaken. What came next was a battle for the narrative. Chloe, backed by her loyal lieutenants Jessica and Lauren, launched what could only be described as a smear campaign. It started with cryptic, self-pitying posts on social media, vague references to emotional trauma and breaking free from toxicity. She never named me outright, but the insinuations were unmistakable. Soon, mutual friends began to treat me differently. A few even reached out, tentatively asking what had really happened. At first, I chose to stay quiet. I've never been one to broadcast personal matters in the public square. But then, things escalated. Word trickled back to me that she was telling people a completely fabricated version of events, that I was quick-tempered, controlling with money, and that I had canceled the wedding mid-argument over something trivial. She portrayed herself as the heartbroken bride, abandoned by a cold, unstable man. Strangely, her romantic getaway with Mark never seemed to make it into these retellings. The final straw came when my own mother called, upset and confused. Rumors began to ripple outward, fueled by hushed conversations and misinformed whispers, suggesting I had wronged Chloe and was solely at fault for how things ended between us. The gossip, I later discovered, had its roots somewhere in Sarah's circle, Chloe's mother, and was now poisoning the perceptions of friends we once shared. When those falsehoods began to reach my own family, I knew that was the line. That was the one place I wouldn't allow it to go unchecked. Ignoring it any longer wasn't an option, but I also wasn't about to give her the scene she wanted. That kind of public meltdown would have played right into her hands. She was hoping I'd react emotionally, lash out, and confirm her carefully curated image of me, bitter, irrational, and dangerous. I chose a different route, one she couldn't twist to her advantage. I responded with the only weapon she had handed me, her own written words. I opened the archived screenshot, the original message she sent me announcing her closure trip to Mark. I hadn't shared it before, and I still wouldn't make it public. That wasn't my style. Instead, I handpicked 3 recipients, each for a reason, and forwarded it directly to them. First, I sent it to Jessica's husband. He and I had always gotten along well, and I knew he valued clarity. My message to him was brief, measured, and direct. Hey man, I know there's a lot flying around. This is the message that started it all. Just wanted you to have the full story. Next, I reached out to my best man, a close friend who happened to move in several of Chloe's extended social circles. With the same screenshot attached, I added a single line. If anyone comes asking about what happened, this is the truth. No speculation, just facts. The third message, and the most delicate, went to Sarah, Chloe's own mother. I chose my words carefully. Sarah, I've kept silent while Chloe has told a version of events that doesn't reflect reality. I'm not interested in drama or fighting this publicly, but I believe you deserve the truth. These are her words. The only decision I made was how to respond to them. The fallout was immediate and unrelenting. Jessica's husband, never one to tolerate deception, reportedly exploded when he saw the message. He confronted Jessica head-on about her role in spreading false stories, making it clear he wanted no part in a campaign built on lies. After that, she vanished from the conversation. No more texts, no vague social media barbs, just silence. Within a matter of days, the tide turned. The narrative that had been forming around me, one where I was the villain, the heartless fiancé who walked away, started to break apart. Quietly, the truth began to circulate. Suddenly, the abrupt cancellation, the change of locks, the halted wedding plans, none of it seemed rash. It made sense. I wasn't acting out of cruelty. I was someone who refused to be lied to and manipulated. But the most dramatic shift happened under Chloe's own roof. Once her mother saw the truth in black and white, the very words Chloe had sent to me, the carefully constructed illusion, shattered. Sarah could no longer maintain the fantasy of Chloe as the jilted, innocent bride. The dynamic in their home changed overnight. Sympathy turned into confrontation. They stopped coddling her and started demanding answers. For the first time, she was being held accountable for the mess she'd made. And then there was Mark, the man at the center of it all. I only heard the details later, passed along through friends of friends, but the irony was impossible to miss. Chloe's vision of rekindled romance with Mark didn't unfold the way she'd imagined. Their first weekend together went well. He was flattered, entertained, even warm. But when she returned the following week uninvited, hauling 22 boxes, a broken engagement, and an emotional disaster in tow, the tone shifted. Mark wasn't preparing to build a new life with her, because he already had one. Yes, Mark was married. That little fact had somehow slipped through the cracks in Chloe's retelling. He had given her the usual script. His marriage was basically over. They were just staying together for appearances. The paperwork was just a formality. And Chloe believed him. But his wife didn't see it that way. When she learned Chloe was planning to move into their guest bedroom, she delivered a clear ultimatum. It's her or me. Mark chose his wife. So the bold move Chloe had made, the grand romantic leap that set fire to everything we'd built, blew up in her face. She had torched her entire life for a man who was never available in the first place, and now she was left with nothing. No fiancé, no backup plan, no apartment of her own. At 31, she was back at her childhood home, sleeping beneath the same ceiling she had once daydreamed under as a teenager. Her parents, once fully invested in protecting her version of events, now looked at her with a mixture of disillusionment and quiet disappointment. And then came the financial reality. 2 months before the wedding, Chloe had quit her job. We had agreed on it together, thinking she'd focus on final details before our honeymoon, and afterward we'd figure out her next professional chapter together. Now that future had evaporated. No wedding, no honeymoon, no paycheck, no plan. Only a haunting silence, and the long, cold task of rebuilding a future from the ruins she created with her own hands. She had relied entirely on me for financial stability, and once that disappeared, reality hit hard. With no income of her own, the unpaid car loan and ignored credit card balances began closing in fast. That's when the flood of messages resumed, but they weren't coming to me this time. She turned to my parents instead, sending overly emotional apologies, expressions of regret, and desperate appeals for them to speak on her behalf. My mother called one evening, her voice low and full of empathy. "She sounds really lost, Alex. I think she's genuinely in pain," she murmured. "She's not hurting, Mom," I told her. "She's just broke." Big difference. There was still one last item on my checklist. The $60,000 we'd poured into a wedding that never happened. My parents had agreed to split the loss with me, but that didn't make the burn any less sharp. Then a thought came to me. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer to ask a simple question. We'd established a joint savings account specifically for wedding expenses, with regular deposits from both sides. After I settled the final vendor bills, there was around $10,000 left untouched. Technically, half of that belonged to me. But in the brief window after Chloe returned to gather her things, she cleaned out the account without a word. My attorney drafted a formal notice addressed to her parents' home. It requested the return of my $5,000, describing her action as a bad faith conversion of jointly held funds following the dissolution of our engagement. The letter also included a detailed summary of our wedding costs, emphasizing that although I wasn't pursuing legal action to reclaim her half of the $60,000, the moral obligation was still hers to bear. Exactly 7 days later, an envelope arrived. Inside was a check for $5,000. No note, no explanation. It had been sent by her father, silent but clear. They understood the boundary had been crossed. That was the last contact I ever received from anyone in her family. This was never about the money. It was about the principle, about receiving, in quiet form, the final confirmation that they too knew where the blame truly rested. That was the end of it. And now, the final update. 6 months have passed. The seasons have turned over. The fury has settled into something quieter, more subdued, a stillness I hadn't felt in years. I'm writing this closing entry not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did. And sometimes that's the clearest sign that peace has returned. Life moved on. The apartment is fully mine now. I repainted the walls in the living room, bought a new couch, infinitely more comfortable than the one Chloe insisted we keep. My closet holds only my clothes. I've started picking up old routines I'd let go during the relationship. Weekend hikes, trivia nights with the guys, reconnecting with the version of myself that existed before everything became a shared identity. From what I've heard, things haven't gone smoothly on her end. Word spread fast that Mark was married, and once that surfaced, it shattered what little defense she had left in our social circle. The consensus was unanimous. This wasn't a single lapse in judgment. It was a pattern of reckless, self-sabotaging choices. Even her closest confidants, Jessica and Lauren, gradually distanced themselves. Supporting a friend nursing a broken heart is one thing. Standing beside someone who wrecked her own future and broke up a marriage is a different story. Their support dissolved as quickly as the narrative they'd tried to sell. She was forced to re-enter the workforce, something she hadn't done in quite some time. Last I heard, she was working a retail job, far removed from the professional path she'd walked away from when she assumed her life was leveling up. She's back under her parents' roof, living in her old bedroom. There's a kind of symmetry in that. She tried to escape what she called the dull predictability of life with me, and ended up exactly where she started. I bumped into her father, David, a couple months back while picking up supplies at the hardware store. The encounter started off awkward, but eventually he walked over, shook my hand, and asked how I'd been. We exchanged a few pleasantries. Just before parting ways, he said, "She's in therapy these days, trying to make sense of things. I hope one day she understands what she lost." It wasn't an apology, but it didn't have to be. It was acknowledgement, a rare moment of honesty, and it gave me a kind of closure I never thought I'd receive. Here's the truth. The real win wasn't watching her life unravel. I don't feel satisfaction in her struggle. The actual victory has been the peace I've built in her absence. My career is thriving. My friendships are stronger than ever. And I can honestly say, I'm happy. I've even started dating again. Nothing serious yet. Just meeting people, enjoying conversation, with no pressure to turn every moment into a long-term decision. Not long ago, I was at a local bar for trivia night when I saw her. Chloe. She was at a table with unfamiliar faces. Our eyes met across the room. For a split second, I saw the woman I once cared for. Then, just as quickly, it faded, replaced by a look of quiet remorse. She gave a faint, sad smile, then looked away. As for me, I felt no anger, no sympathy, nothing at all. That was the moment I understood what real healing feels like. She went looking for closure with someone else, and ended up giving me closure from her. And for that, in a strange way, I'm sincerely thankful. Thank you to everyone who's followed this story. This is the final post. The chapter is closed. Time to move forward.